So, yeah, before I start this little timer that I've got going, I'll just introduce. This is Dojo Talks. We try to do this once a week. Sometimes Kostya Kavutsky's on with us. Sometimes we have a guest. Today it's just me, and I am David Pruess. And we are today tackling a potpourri, a menagerie of topics that I've thrown together.
Yeah.
And we're going to try to do 10 minutes on each. And, if we go a little over, that's all right. We will try to address any questions in the chat. And, David, why don't you introduce number one? I think of all the topics that we have going on, this is the most technically and legally complicated.
Okay. Well, I don't know if there's been an update on the Wang Hao situation in the last few days. I was researching it again last night, not even just for this show, just out of interest, because I'm quite interested in this. So I was looking, I didn't find any new information since the article came out. Like Wang Hao's arguing with them that it shouldn't be held, that the candidates shouldn't be restarted in Russia right now, that Russia is not a safe place to be or to travel or to go, that there'd be connecting flights, that I don't know exactly what his list of complaints against Russia is, but I played in Russia once, Jesse, and I
Uh huh.
I would also not want to go play in Russia. Just based
Uh-huh.
on that. So I don't know if I'm missing some updates on it, but apparently he was in an argument with the lawyers at FIDE, and then he was discussing with the lawyers what the options were or something like that, complaining about what they were doing. And then Dvorkovich sent him an email which he described as rude. I don't know how much debate there would be on that. I would also describe it as rude, but we can argue later if that's a point of contention. Um, and so it's unclear if Wang Hao is going to continue or not in the candidates. That's that's the latest I've heard. Is there more recent
Uh,
than that, Jesse?
well, I think it's very complicated. I think there's a lot of moving pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as far as what you said, everything you just said makes sense. And now, I was the one, by the way, I'm responsible for writing these ridiculous topics out. And the reason I wrote Wang Hao Radjabov in the candidates is, to me, the issues are a little bit or very much interrelated.
I agree.
Because Radjabov decided, you know, I wouldn't even say he necessarily dropped out, but
No.
he put his participation in doubt.
Yeah.
And then I guess it was mostly Arkady, this guy, who I find is a very hard guy for me to understand. I think it's very complicated because he is so closely connected to Putin that it's like, oh man, this is really weird. Other people I know, who are not Russian players, do not have this same kind of reservation with this guy. Like, I don't think Nigel Short or a lot of these other guys, Emil Sutovsky, who work within FIDE, think it's problematic. They've never voiced it being problematic that he's so close to Putin. Anyways, you got this guy at the top, and he has made several pretty draconian decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And in his defense, I think you could say if he hadn't made the draconian decisions, like it would be hard to organize the event. So I think what's going to happen with Wang Hao is he either is going to have to toe the line or they're going to push him out in the same way that they pushed Radjabov out. And in a way, like, unless they bring Radjabov back, which I doubt they're going to do, I'm going to say 95% chance that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're going to they're going to also have to proceed, I think, in a very uncompromising manner with Wang Hao as well.
I would guess, Jesse, that this guy Dvorkovich is the kind of guy who's never said I'm sorry in his life, who's never apologized and said, you know what, I was wrong about something. Um, so yeah, letting Radjabov back in, which of course they should do. They should restart the whole event with Radjabov, but letting him back in, I would be shocked. I would be shocked
Yeah.
to
I
see them change their stripes.
I think honestly, okay, so two things on that. First, I totally agree with you, and I think it's a thing about post-Soviet power struggles where showing weakness is a really big deal, and that's
Right.
why for them, like, to go back, I both go back on what you said, and to even open the door for compromise is
Right.
something they're just not going to do.
Right. But like, let's put it this way: was it a mistake for them to start the candidates when they did? That's
Whew.
pretty obviously yes, right? Like, since they weren't able to complete it, and like, it was predictable to anyone with moderate insight. So it's obvious that they were wrong to start it when they did, but they're never going to say like, "Oh, we made a mistake."
Well, on that
They
point
won't even
about
say, "Now that we know, we can see it's a mistake." No, 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 never.
on the point of it being obvious, I want to say that it's not entirely obvious to me in the sense that the virus situation is, as far as I can tell, basically the same now as it was then. The same. The science hasn't evolved that much. The rate of infection hasn't changed that much. So we're basically at the same situation.
Mm-hmm.
We've come to a culture of face masks since then, but honestly, that isn't to me any kind of game changer in how you deal with stuff. So in any case, like, as a chess fan, I was happy that they did it, and I'm happy that it's happening again, especially when I consider that it might be another half year or even more until this virus situation even goes away.
Right, but I mean, they could have just restarted it online. They've got no reason to make the players travel, and also, I mean, they should include Radjabov and Wang Hao, and like in general, like the organizers should listen to the players, to some extent, right? Instead of just being rude to them.
I think it's really interesting, the idea of it being online. I don't think people would, myself included, would have a hard time accepting it as, the candidates match if it was just online. It would be hard for me to do.
I mean, it's also hard to accept it if they're just like kicking out players at random.
Well, right. And, another moving part in this that I think has to be mentioned is it's not clear to me that it's just going to be Wang Hao who has a problem. I can imagine people like Fabi also having trouble getting both into Russia and out of Russia, coming
Hmm.
back. For example, we have, both you and I have a mutual friend who came here from France and hasn't been able to go back, right? And that kind of
Yeah.
stuff is like, well, that really complicates the matter about, can these people come in and what kind of negotiations happen, and I think it's a very complicated thing. And for example, when we say maybe the event should be restarted, maybe, but that would be unfair to the people currently in the lead of the third of it, right?
Yeah.
To Nepo, for example, hugely unfair to him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I
and
mean, honestly, the injustice to Radjabov, like, predates and is greater than any injustice to anyone after. So, I mean, for sure, the event should restart with Radjabov. If we were talking about what should happen, the event should restart from round zero with Radjabov in it. And anything after that is all just errors built upon errors.
yeah, it's interesting. It's going to be errors upon errors. And let me just make a fun, well, to me, a very interesting note. I don't enjoy most sports, but one of the things I've noticed is that the sports events I've enjoyed most have been conducted via authoritarian and corrupt organizations. I think in particular of FIDE doing these world championship matches through the years. I mean, the FIDE has been historically corrupt all my lifetime.
Sure. And your favorite sport to watch is chess. So I
And
guess that's definitional.
no, but in particular the world championship
Hmm.
matches, and aside from the ridiculousness that they put on in that knockout thing in the 90s, which I don't recognize as the world championship title. The other things are, they've been very interesting matches. And then just via comparison, I want to say the FIFA World Cup, also an incredibly corrupt organization. One of my favorite events to watch as a fan. So I have to, like, there's something I don't know. That's interesting about that. I don't know if it means anything that there are all these corrupt organizations, obviously corrupt too, and I enjoy the sports events magnificently in them. But in any case, right, this event going forward, it is going to have this draconian authoritarian thing, and there is always going to be a cloud on it no matter what. And it wouldn't surprise me if it falls apart in the next month. Because if Wang Hao goes, if Fabi has a problem, Mitch is saying in the chat that, right, we're banned to going to Russia. Obviously, maybe Putin signs something and lets him in, lets him
Sure.
out. There's all kinds of ways it could happen, but that
Or
in
keeps
itself,
them.
that
Or
in
keeps
itself is
them.
a negotiation. And his seconds, are they going to let him in? And that kind of question.
Oh, definitely a good idea to, at the last moment, not let his seconds in. It's a great move for Nepo, I think.
Okay.
I'm not saying
So,
that Nepo would want that kind of move. I'm just saying like
right.
that'd be a classic power move for the Russian politicians.
Okay, let's move on. Topic number 2. We could
All right.
talk. We could have talked forever about that, obviously, but
Yeah.
this is why we give ourselves only 10 minutes. All right, here we go. I, as a fan, I'll just begin this one. David will fill this out more than I can. But as a fan, the Armageddon format currently being used in Norway, I haven't even watched those Armageddon games. They're not interesting to me at all. And so, no, I'm not into it. But honestly, as a fan, also this Norway chess thing as an event, beautiful. Really been enjoying it. The fighting chess and the games both yesterday and today with Magnus and Fabi. Beautiful games. Beautiful
Mm-hmm.
games. So the event itself, even though I don't like the Armageddon format, I don't feel like the Armageddon format has detracted from the event itself.
Because you can just ignore it.
Yeah, it's like a sideshow. It's kind of like sometimes I feel they do little sideshows where, they take the players off to some cooking competition, or they they play soccer on the side. That's cool. You can do that. It doesn't bother me, but it's
Yeah.
not the actual competition for me as a
I
fan.
would have gladly watched the Bake Off that they did on the rest
Right.
day. I
Yeah,
would
yeah,
have
yeah.
gladly watched that. Okay, so to you, the Armageddon format is pointless, but you can happily ignore it so it doesn't ruin anything for you.
So far, that's how I feel about it. Yeah.
Okay. It slightly bothers me just the way like random stupid things out there in the world slightly bother me, even if there's no reason they should, right? Like, if I hear that somebody in DC is wearing a winter coat in summer,
Uh huh.
obviously it has no effect on me yet. It just makes some part of my brain like wrinkle up, like why people,
Uh huh.
why?
Yeah.
So it does that to me because, I mean, not too badly because I think it's good to try out different formats. You may not be a fan of that idea, but that could be a larger discussion another day maybe. But like, I think it's great to try out some different formats and then be willing to just like reject those that, are not that good and try out others. But I really, really prefer the idea of you just turn the board around and keep the time you have on the clock. And I think it'd be much more interesting to try something like that if they want to sort of have like a follow-up decisive game. Or if it's going to be an Armageddon game, maybe like, play like at least like a rapid game, like 30 or 40 minutes or something like that. But like a blitz game is so random on the same day. It doesn't add anything to me. It's completely disconnected from the previous game. Last year, the Armageddon game was scored as being worth like a point, and this year a half a point, I think. So this year, if you draw your game, but then win the Armageddon, I think you get 1.5. I'm afraid I'm going to get this wrong or something.
Right.
But I think now you get 1.5 compared to the player who won their classical game getting 3. So even winning the Armageddon game, you're only in the same sort of relative standing as if you'd drawn, period, right? But if you draw and lose the Armageddon game, you're falling even further behind. The point scores may matter a little bit if they start influencing how the players play. That's the only reason I wonder about this, right, Jesse? It's like,
okay.
like if a draw is getting you like 1 point versus a win 3, basically, right? Or in this
Yeah.
case, on average, 1.25, depending on how good you think you are at rapid,
Hmm.
right? It might put a little extra pressure to play for a win, kind of like just using soccer scoring, as some random tournaments have done, which I'm not a huge fan of. I mean, I don't love tournaments with 90% draw rates, but I don't think the answer to it is soccer scoring. But anyway, not to get into 500 topics. But last year, I think that if you won the game after drawing the Armageddon, you could get 2 points out of 3, which is then like better than just drawing, right? It may have even have been 2.5, but it was something like it was 2 or 2.5. So if you're really good at rapid chess, like Magnus in his world championship matches with Karyakin or like Caruana, there's like a certain strategy at some point where you just draw your classical games in order to win the Armageddon games, and you're racking up enough points, to win the tournament.
Right.
Kind of like drawing out, but like drawing out on steroids, right? Because you're actually like doing better than anybody else who's drawing. Or people who are winning are catching up slower. So in that sense, I think it's slightly bad to have this like blitz game that's like messing with the standings. I mean, ideally the players are just kind of like playing their classical games normally and not worrying about it, just like you.
Uh-huh.
And then you choose to like log off when it's time for the blitz game, and they just like, switch modes, right? And go from like classical Carlsen to blitz Carlsen, but he's not really linking the stuff too much.
Right.
And the classical games are still of good quality, which I think so far has been the case. But to me, an experiment like this just runs the risk of like the stupid blitz games messing with how people approach the play, which I don't like. And so, although I like trying lots of different things, I've seen like 10 proposals that I like better than this. So,
Well, right, and actually, where this discussion leads into the World Championship discussion is precisely this thing you're talking about of an incentive to go to the rapid came up basically in both, well, not basically, but definitely came up in the last two World Championship matches,
yeah.
where Carlsen basically willed it. He willed it to the rapids and knew he was going to win there, and
Yeah.
that's exactly what happened. A ballsy decision because it could have actually, I felt it could have gone either way, especially when the final game with Caruana, when he had such a nice position, he was like, no, I'm just going to take this to the rapids.
I mean, he had like an overwhelmingly nice
He
position
had a
that
really
game.
nice
And
position, I
and
thought, yeah.
to me, that's the tragedy, to not see that game played out, right?
Right,
That's one
right.
of the reasons I hate that whole rapid thing. It's like any format where Carlsen doesn't try to win that position, like it just doesn't make sense. You've obviously like ruined the classical chess. It's not just that you've tacked something else on, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you've ruined the classical, because like I can't think of any normal tournament classical reason scenario where you don't win that game as black, or at least try. I mean, so yeah.
Well,
That
let me ask you a question, David. So, people should know in the dojo that David was one of the first to really come out very strongly in terms of not allowing people to agree to draws. And there's been a whole evolution in the chess culture that actually I want to do a video on at some point about how we've evolved to really what David's position is. Because back in the day, people would just agree to draws all the time. And so I want to ask you, though, David, as a fan, how
yeah.
much does it hurt you when the draws are agreed? Not necessarily early, but just like in general. And yeah, what do you want them to do?
I mean, that I'm not such a like, crude person that I can't appreciate a well played and fully played draw, right?
Right,
So
right.
I'm not just like some random lunatic, like, who just learned about chess and is mad that people are drawing and have no idea why. How much does it hurt me when people agree to a draw? I mean, it depends on like the reasons for it and how much of the game has been played out, right? But like the Carlsen Caruana game, that hurt me a lot. I wanted to see that game,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
right?
that one
So
was also just weird. It was bad for chess because it was just weird. It was like, what are you doing?
that one hurt me at every level.
Yeah.
Some other draw, I mean, it's kind of specific, case by case, I guess. But
But you want them to, if they agree to a draw, to turn the board around
I mean,
and then play
that's
that one.
one really cool proposal that incorporates the idea of like if the game's a draw, you kind of keep playing till you've got like a winner for the day, and the game can still count as like a classical draw for ratings and standings and whatever. But if you want to have some kind of thing where like everyone gets to see some blood that day because you're tired of like you think that the fans aren't going to be enticed by a tournament where sometimes like all 4 games are a draw that day or all 5 games, and Norway it's only 3 games or whatever, right? Like if you're afraid of that and you want to try and provide some more forced excitement, then one really superior example in my opinion is you just flip the board around and start playing again, and you use the time that you have left. So that's a way of sort of like counting it down.
But I mean, the amazing thing about that, if I understand the way it would work properly, is
Yeah.
when you then offer your opponent a draw, you aren't offering a draw, you're offering to switch positions, is what you're doing, right?
Well, no, you restart with opposite colors. You start a new game with opposite colors.
Oh, I see, I
You
see,
know what I
I
mean?
see.
So like
Yeah,
our
yeah.
game peters out to a draw. It's not like my king rook and pawn versus your king rook and pawn. If we switch the
Yeah.
board, like you're gonna somehow try and beat me, and then if you can't, then we'll switch it again, and I'll keep trying to beat you with that one pawn.
Uh-huh.
We reset the pieces. So if it took you like an hour and a half of thought time to get a draw against me, and it only took me an hour to get a draw against you, then I got like time odds in that second game, right?
Right.
Or another way of thinking about it is if you can't beat me with white, then you have to face me with black right after or whatever, but maybe the guy who had black used more time. So now they've got white and less time because they had to defend last time. It's a way of sort of like, in a sense, continuing the battle, right? Using the slight, transferring maybe a plus equal into the next game,
Right.
based on the pressure that you put on your opponent or something.
Okay, let's move on to this next amazing. In a way, this is a little bit less of a debate. A lot of these questions we do here are a debate. This one is just a very bizarre chess story that happened this last week. And I should just introduce it a little bit. I played with Igor Rausis in the Bundesliga for the great team Fjernheim. We were in the second tier of the Bundesliga beginning around 1996, and then we made it after a year of struggle to the 2 years of struggle into the first Bundesliga, which is a huge achievement. And Igor Rausis was our first board, and it was a really interesting time for me. And honestly, I don't think if I didn't have that experience playing in the Bundesliga, I have to start the clock. Sorry. If I didn't have that experience in the Bundesliga, I don't know if I would have become a GM. It was because the Bundesliga was so well organized, and it had what I would call chess culture, and there was like a camaraderie too in the team. In any case, Igor was there, and he was usually our first board, and then we had this great guy named Sokolov, who was number 2, and they were both around low 2500s at the time. And this, of course,
Which Sokolov, Ivan or Andre?
It was an Andre, but
Or another?
let me just tell you, there's a lot of Andres. And, honestly, like you go to the chess space and my Andrei Sokolov is like listed as Andrei Sokolov 3 or something like that because there's so many of them. I haven't had contact with him, unfortunately, for years. Or Igor, and this is, of course, this was right at the beginning where computers, there was no cell phones, of course. It was just like computers, were accessible for, mortals. And you could, it was the first days where you had some opening and you could check your opening on the computer. Anyway, so we traveled to these cities, and it was we played, like, especially when we got to the first Bundesliga, I got to play Vagania, and I got to play all kinds of beautiful Nizzi Pianu. I got to play loads of big names there. And we were like the team basically that had no money. And Igor would come in, and pretty sure all that our club was paying him was just like to fly in. We paying maybe as expenses to fly in, and then he was like crashing on people's couches while he was there, and he got a visa for the time.
What does he get from it then?
Well, he got to travel around a little bit. He got the travel visa, and he would go around these other tournaments. He was very poor, but he wasn't like a a resentful kind of poor. There's a kind of poverty that you can become resentful, but I never remember him as being resentful of being poor.
Uh-huh.
The other thing I should say about him is that he learned chess very late, like 17 or 18. So it's very astonishing what he was able to do in just in becoming a GM. And then, of course, I came back to the States late 1999, so I had no contact with him or the club after that, really. But he came back on the radar, of course, years and years later. And one of the first thing I got to stress about this, and I've seen this in other cases with cheating, is the people who are cheating are not the people you would expect. They're not the like murderous thug people out there. They're actually like Igor Rausis. That guy was a very gentle soul. I mean, that guy.
But hang on for a second.
Yeah.
Name a top chess player
Mm-hmm.
or a chess player
Yeah.
who you think of as being that other category, the murderous thug type, and then tell me that they don't cheat. Like, who would you expect to cheat but doesn't? Who's the thug type? Because I think of chess players as generally not really being that many like thugs, honestly.
There were a lot of guys traveling. Well, I don't want, by not naming anybody, I want to say there were a lot of Russian guys hanging out in the United States, post-Soviet Union, that were pretty thuggish. I think they were probably okay, and their thuggishness, I think, was mostly related to the fact that they were in a foreign culture that they didn't really adapt to, and they didn't know the language that well, and they were willing to do. I feel like, yeah, they were in mildly desperate circumstances, and that led them to do things that were dirty. In fact, this was pre-computer, but yeah, they were dirty, and they would arrange games, and they would throw games and that whole thing. And right, I don't want to name names, but that was definitely the people that I think of as thuggish in the chess world. Yeah.
So you're not saying that those people didn't cheat. You're saying that other people also cheat who you wouldn't think of. Is that
Well, right, and
fair enough?
very innocent, gentle people.
Yeah. Okay.
Like
Got it.
without naming names, it was a kid we
Right.
both knew at the mechanics, and that kid was the gentlest little kid I've ever seen, and then he was busted. So yeah, it's a really interesting phenomenon.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things I guess I want to say as well about the phenomenon with Rouseys is it's an interesting. Okay, let's just back it up. The guy, this is, I don't want to bury the lead here. The guy goes to this tournament, and he goes under an assumed name, and he actually changed the name on like his ID and stuff.
Right. He didn't just make it up. He actually got like a name change and a
Yeah.
new ID.
And then, he's wearing, for the most part, a face mask at this tournament. Though I did see photos from the tournament, and not everyone's wearing a face mask, which is kind of amazing just within the American context to think about anyway, because everyone here is so militant about the face mask. But anyways, there he was, kind of halfway covered anyway, covered both within the face mask and with the new identity. And so this was, we were talking with our tours, doing the business just yesterday.
Yeah.
And while we were talking, we were doing the Ultimate Sensei. And while we were talking, it came to someone put it in the chat, and I was like, what? And then I went and looked, and it was the very same Artur's, and he was the one who discovered him, Artur's Nixons, and he discovered him, and it was particularly hard for the guy, for Artur's, because like this tournament was a celebration really of his old coach. And so it was like this whole, really an amazing story. Anyways, what I want to stress before I hand it over, and I realize I've talked too long, is to me what was interesting is that when you hand out a ban to not play, and by the way, the guy would have been able to play in this event in terms of FIDE because this was not a FIDE event. So that's an interesting distinction in itself. So he wasn't technically banned from this event that Artur's was at, but the tournament organizer basically told him to leave anyway. Anyways, what am I trying to say? That when you ban somebody who is a chess player to their very soul, you are putting on, what this shows is you are putting on some, how heavy it is when you do it. If you did it to somebody who didn't care about chess, well, then it probably doesn't matter too much. But yeah, this is obviously a major burden to Igor's soul if he's doing all this just to play a couple games.
Right. Right. Like if somebody's not really a chess player, right? If they just like pick up the game
Right.
and they play for like half a year and they're like, 800 or something, and then they figure out that they can computer cheat and they, win a few tournaments, and then they get caught and kicked out. That person doesn't really have an investment in chess. It's not in their soul. They just move on to trying to find some other scam in another field. But if somebody has actually put in the time and work to become a master, and then at some point they juice.
They juice, that's right.
They still do love chess, even though they just took a giant bathroom break on chess.
Right.
So that person will really feel the punishment. It'll really hurt them if they can't play.
Right. You know, and I think too, I think one of the things about a guy like Igor's is he was traveling around Europe, poor as unimaginably poor. And so by juicing, I don't think he ever made a lot of money, but I'm sure he made a little bit. When you're like 2660, if you're playing at the 2660 level, obviously he wasn't playing at that level. He was cheating to get to that level. But at that level, I think you do win a couple events and you get some honoraria for playing Bundesliga and other leagues, which he was doing, even before his rating rise, as it were, right? Yeah. Hard times. I don't think he wasn't. This is part of the interesting question. He's saying, I don't understand why he wasn't allowed to play. I think it was ultimately the tournament director's discretion that he told him to leave, and perhaps he didn't have to leave, but then out of shame, I think he did. That's my understanding.
I mean, like other players are complaining about it. So the tournament director has to make a choice of balancing the needs of different people, right? As often the case, right? Mm-hmm. So the tournament director has to decide, like, who do I want here, right? You're running any business. Like, I'm running my chess club and there are some people playing in my chess club. This is in the past, right? It's not now. I don't have a chess club. But, if I'm running my chess club and there are some people who are playing over here and they're making a lot of noise, and there's some people playing over here and they want it quiet and they complain about each other, like I have to figure out how to balance it. And, ultimately in some case, who has to stay or who has to leave if they can't live with each other, right? So if you've got several people complaining that there's an event to, memorialize somebody who's very important in their lives, and it's a spiritual event for them, as Jesse will definitely agree.
Right.
If you're there worshiping your first sensei, and then there's some cheater there who to you is, a chess heathen, and you don't want him defiling it, then I can understand. I mean, Artur's told us that he was really upset about it, and he was really upset just recounting it to us.
Mm-hmm.
So at
That's
the
right.
point, the tournament director has to decide who does he want more or less at his event. And this director made the decision, which you guys can agree or disagree with, but I agree with.
Right.
He made a decision, like he'd rather have Artur's and a few other people feel comfortable there, and maybe lots of people would have had the same complaint if everybody realized who was there. He'd rather make them feel comfortable and ask the cheater to leave than say, like, well, sorry guys, like, there's no rule, he can't be here.
Okay, I could talk about this all day. Let's move on. And I apologize mildly here for my poor phrasing of this one. I wrote it down as the Role of Fide. Mostly because there's so much to talk about in terms of FIDE, but let me just clarify. FIDE, man, corrupt organization that it is doing the World Championship business, now has potentially a new role to fill, and that is the arbiter of the cheating claims. And it's a really weird thing because to a certain extent, I'm not clear that FIDE should have those auspices. In particular, in the latest cheating event, we had the question of chess.com banning people. Or we could imagine Lichess banning people. And those are separate bans that really have nothing to do with FIDE. Now, I did make a video since then talking about my own perspective on how to stop online cheaters. But the question remains, and regardless of whatever suggestion you want to take up for stopping cheating, that the arbiter of last resort, I think, has to be resolved. And honestly, I don't trust FIDE at all to, not just because they're corrupt, but because they would have to make a very determined stand on this issue. And
Right.
I think it has to be soon. Like, we need to come to some agreement now about not only like what the ban would be or what the penalties would be, but also like how is it determined? At the moment, for example, chess.com has an algorithm, but it's not public, so I don't know, I don't see how that can legally be binding if it's not in some way public. But I'll throw it over to you, Dave.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this sheds new light on our question last week. Actually, it's a good perspective because last week when we were talking about chess.com handling cheating, some people were like, who is chess.com to make this decision? But we never asked the question, if not chess.com, then who, right?
Right.
And this question brings that up. If there's nobody more qualified than chess.com to make that, then it's like when somebody says this move is bad and I say, well, what move was better than it? And they can't find a better move, right?
Right.
And it means you've got a bad position, not a bad move, right? So that would mean like maybe there may be whatever pros and cons to chess.com banning people and it having a big effect on their careers. But if you don't have a better suggestion, then that's just how it is, along with all its pros and cons, right? So the major alternative, I guess, to chess.com would be FIDE. Another alternative could be national federations. Another alternative could maybe be some kind of like international commission on chess cheating that's separate and independent from FIDE. Because if it's just a committee that FIDE set up with other people who are already on other FIDE committees, that's not really any different, right? So those are kind of like the options that we look at. So today, let's consider the option of like FIDE as being the group that decides cheating. And immediately, my first thought once you offer this option is like, yeah, they don't seem like much more qualified than chess.com or anybody else to do this.
Right.
I understand they're sort of like the obvious person. Like they're the person who's sitting in the driving seat when you get to the car and you're like, none of us have driver's licenses and none of us slept last night and we're all drunk. So who should drive? And you're like, well, that guy's sitting in the driving seat.
Right.
Maybe it's him, but nobody's like, that guy would make a great driver.
And a historical example, I think, that both you and I were affected by, that I think is a little bit parallel to this, is, the U.S. Chess Federation was in charge of the U.S. championships for years, and they bungled it just again and again and again.
Yeah.
They weren't able to get the money straight. They weren't able to stop the cheating either. And it was ultimately to their lack of ability to stop the cheating that they lost their main sponsor of the U.S. Championship, and how it eventually then got signed over. And when I say it, I mean the U.S. Championship, how the U.S. Championship just got signed over in terms of responsibility to the St. Louis Chess Club.
Right.
And it was this epic move where basically you could say the U.S. Chess Federation just lost loads of what it might be. Like at the moment,
Right.
when you think about U.S. Chess Federation, it's basically just in charge of like the rating system,
Yeah.
And maybe that's what FIDE should be too. But the problem, especially on an international level, is you do need some kind of legal force, and like the St. Louis Chess Club can't have that kind of legal force, nor do I imagine can chess.com have that kind of legal force on an international level. So in a way, it has to be something like FIDE or some kind of organization that has power. It has to have power.
Yeah, I mean, it could come from the ACP, the Association of Chess Professionals. So I don't know what percentage of chess professionals are actually part of it. You know, if it's like 10%, then no. And if it's, and depends whether it's got, democratic or hierarchical structure, how good a job it'll do. of representing what the bulk of players actually want and believe. But you've got the same problem with FIDE. You've just got one unqualified bozo after the next in charge of FIDE, and I've got no trust in whatever they do. So, they can't. It's not just that they make an occasional error, or that they
Uh-huh.
make errors and then don't ever realize that they made an error, or that they make errors and then don't ever apologize or recognize those errors publicly. It's like literally they just get every single thing wrong. Like you'd really have to look with a fine-tooth comb for something they did right. So how would we expect them to handle cheating correctly? It's pointless. I think it's pointless to look to FIDE, actually.
Other interesting thing about FIDE and cheating that's kind of interesting to think about is the case, of course, that everybody knows about is Igor Rausis, and that guy had no political power at all. Like he was just a minor GM. But
Yeah.
when you think about this latest case with Petrosian, you had the entire Armenian chess federation and society basically come to his aid. And my guess is they have pull with guys like Arkady. And, when you've got a powerful federation like that behind you, well, I think it'd be very hard politically to do that. Oh man, and I'll tell you, as far as I can tell, Petrosian and the Armenian Chess Federation they're like up in arms, and whether they cheated or not, you got to say like anybody who's accused of cheating is gonna scream to the clouds, right? They'll scream to the gods as loud as they can because they'll realize that Igor Rausis' fate, man, it's not so easy to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the only thing I would say would be a good role for FIDE would be disassembling itself, and then being replaced completely by something else by other people. In the meantime, as far as like their role on cheating, I would say nothing. And the best thing I can come up with on the fly, though this is sort of an extension of the topic that we didn't think about before or prepare for or anything, but the best thing I can come up with is like each individual like organizer and arbiter, etc., can determine what's going on at their event, and they can let other people know what they think happened at their event, and people can draw their conclusions from that. So like chess.com is perfectly allowed to say, we think somebody cheated in our tournament, and St. Louis can say, we think that Wesley So cheated in his game yesterday against whoever, against Jeffrey Xiong. And then other people can draw what conclusions they want about that. They can trust or not trust the organizer, but that's the best it's going to get, I would say.
I see.
Right
So
now.
that's an interesting vision. That's like a pluralistic sense of accusation and defense, right?
Right. So like if I'm
Oof.
the St. Louis organizer, right, and you're Wesley So, I could tell you like you cheated yesterday. So you're out of this tournament and you can't play in tournaments at our club for the next year or whatever. I can make up anything I want for my
Yeah.
organization, right? Someone else who's running tournaments might say, the Charlotte Chess Center might say we use a 3-year ban, right? And I might say we use a 1-year ban or whatever. And then like if someone else is running the Charlotte Chess Center, they can say, that guy cheated at the US Championships next week, maybe. Do I want them playing in my tournament? And they can decide, whether that affects their appetite for that player at their events, based on what is or isn't available publicly.
Okay. No, I think the pluralistic thing is really interesting, and we should get into that at another point. Yeah, that's honestly it wasn't even on my radar in my mind. And when I did the video this last week, I just kind of assumed there had to be a legal force, but right with a pluralistic vision, that's almost like an anarchist dream. Right? Like you have all these different legal systems floating out there, and they can apply whatever they like.
Yeah.
Okay, let me move on, and I'll just introduce the new topic. I'm gonna put it over here. Actually, how do I do this here? Let's I got rid of you. I didn't want that. Oh, where'd you go, buddy?
I'm over here.
Oh man, where'd you go?
Follow my voice.
Oh, that was really bizarre. I don't know what happened to you, buddy. You got
They're
lost.
saying that the finger was more important than me.
How did the finger take you over, buddy?
Oh.
Okay, this is
Oh
what we're gonna
boy.
do. I'm gonna figure that out, but in the meantime, I'll tell you what. So the topic is just these new opportunities in online teaching, and I have things to say about it. But I'm gonna get David back. So, David, you take over for a second. I'm gonna get you back.
Okay. But can you tell us what the topic is?
That there are
Because you
new.
wrote these topics and I don't know what they are.
I'm sorry. The topic is
What
that.
are the new opportunities?
Well, okay. I'm gonna tease something here.
Okay.
And one of the reasons I want to talk about it is precisely this tease that I'm going to do. We might, at the dojo, start helping out with the U.S. Chess School. I have also been involved in the U.S. Chess School as a teacher. And the interesting thing with the U.S. Chess School is, first of all, for myself, I just want to say that thing is, well, it's a big deal for me in that. How should I say it? Oh God. Oh, it got. How did it? How does it happen, buddy? I don't know why it goes
What?
away.
I
You
think you're
go
coming
away.
back on. Oh, and gone again.
I want to get it again. I don't know why it does that, David. You disappear sometimes.
All right.
I don't know why it does it. In any case, the thing about it, and I'm not going to touch anything anymore. I'm just going to leave it be. I'm not going to touch anything ever again. Did you go to the U.S. Chess School when you were a kid? How about we start with that?
Nope.
No,
Didn't exist yet.
It didn't exist. Well,
I
here's
mean,
the.
Greg's basically my contemporary or my generation, right? And he founded it, so we weren't like kids by then.
Well, see, that's funny you say that. I feel like it definitely existed before then. When I was a kid, we got sent. It was I didn't have any coaches or anything, and I got sent to New York City to study a little bit with Edmar Mednis.
Oh, I did that camp too for a week.
Yeah, that was.
Coincidentally with Greg's sister.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Jen was there the same year as me.
Well, to me, that's what I mean by it.
Okay.
You know, that thing has, in my mind, been around forever.
Okay. Well, I did a 1 week session with Edmar Mednis, kind of like a, summer camp for some good kids from around the country for a week, like 8 kids, maybe, probably same as you. But I don't remember there being like the same kind of like organization and seriousness as what Greg has, with like multiple students and lessons and classes and different lecturers and all that. This is a whole different level.
I agree, it's a different level, and part of the reason I brought up the old thing is not only because it resonated with my own personal history, is important to me, but it is something, and what's happened with the U.S. Chess School, like a lot of other things that have evolved since COVID, is there's just new opportunities in online teaching. We've had numerous camps that wouldn't have happened before. They could have, but they've really taken off now. And the U.S. Chess School has definitely taken off as well. For example, tomorrow night, I'm starting this Rook Endgame boot camp through CoChess, and that's going to be like 10 hours. And another really cool thing about that, here's an example of a new opportunity in online teaching, is, like let's say the way I learned Rook Endgames, just as an example. I looked at a lot of books, and a lot of times it would be like, here's a position, and then like some long analysis that was kind of hard to understand without any human words. And then it was something presented as if, well, here, buddy, you need to learn this. You need to, memorize this, or, somehow absorb it. Well, now, what's so cool about the online opportunities is tomorrow, not only will I be able to talk about a specific position with these people in the camp, but I will have them spar in a lot of these key positions. And I think that's the most important. One of the most important things about, say, learning a Rook endgame is you have to realize it's not just like learning it in some kind of scientific sense, but you need practice, and practice under strain of both an opponent and a clock, of being able to figure something out over the board. So one of the reasons I put it out there is I think you could even find more ways in which online teaching is interesting. But to me, right away, I want to say that the things that stand out are the fact that the U.S. Chess School has now gone online, and we're going to try to help them if we can. I don't know if it's going to happen yet. We're going to try to help them stream it and then also put it out on YouTube, which I think is one of the biggest things that's just so amazing. Let me just back up if people don't know about the U.S. Chess School. Is Greg Shahada has been doing this for a long time, mostly a labor of love. He's got some people, some funders have helped him get teachers and stuff. I've been on there. Kostya Kavutski's been on there. And through the years, it's a really remarkable thing. And actually, I did it live in person once at the San Francisco Mechanics. But now it's moved online, and so now you can have 70, 80 students at a time. And, it's this whole Zoom culture thing, which I'm just getting used to, where you can allow somebody to speak, for example, and they can give their view of a position. Very interesting and new thing, and that's why I wanted to talk about it, because I really think everything is evolving now with these things. There's, in addition, let's mention Agard has had a bunch of camps you can do online. Kramnik has had camps. My friend told me he did a camp with Anand online. Wow,
Nice.
amazing, right?
Nice.
Just being able to be in the same Zoom call as a lot of these people, and being in the same way also with Twitch, right? The fact that you can kind of not just see a person's moves, but hear them talk about the game and their life and whatever is going on. It's a huge proximity that just didn't exist not too long ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So sounds really awesome. Yeah. What should I say about this topic?
Well,
It's
I
great that
think
there's new opportunities.
I think you are also kind of on the front line of this. Like, you are pushing yourself in these streams you've been doing. For example, David was just doing this amazing thing where he was playing people blindfold online. And it can, there's all kinds of things like that you've been doing that I'm honestly like, oh, right. You're kind of exploring the limits of this new technology and the things we can do. And of course, other streamers are pushing the limits too, like finding new ways of exploring chess. And it's happening because of the new technology and just the fact, too, of the chess boom and the COVID times, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, I've been trying to push for this for a long time, right? I mean, in 2009, I started working at chess.com, and I already had in mind at that point the potential for the internet to allow people to learn chess in new ways. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, it's every couple days for 10 years now, something new has been tried, and there's a lot of great, incredible opportunities, and you see more and more people who play chess really well. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else you want to say about the topic, or if you have a question about it, but like, I agree that it's incredible and that it's growing quickly.
Well, actually, let me give you some credit here. I mean, because I'm just thinking back on it. So let me just give everybody a little history. We were at the GM house. It was about 2009, I think it was end of 2009, and David, like, the chess this is my memory of it. David can correct me if I'm wrong, but like the chess.com guys came up from the South Bay to meet some players, and my sense of it is that if you were, especially when we think about it, the current developments, as we could think about it 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, of you being a visionary in this sense that you kind of saw it before it really happened.
Yeah, I mean, sure, that's true.
Because I want to say at that point, like at that point, it's just remarkable even to think about, because at that point we didn't really have video streaming at the same level that we do now, right? Like, it was possible, but it was very difficult, and most people didn't have the capability to stream video on their device. So you could get audio streamed, or recorded, but it was very difficult to get, like, say, somebody's face. And at that time, of course, it was the ICC where most people were playing.
It was
And
very early days for that. Yeah,
yeah,
for that sort of thing.
and so just the idea already of blitz, and I want to admit, yeah, even now, I'm always not a reactionary, but I'm always just like, oh, is something new's going to happen in terms of learning it? Just actually, yeah, David, I'm going to just say maybe I think the interesting thing is you're just like, what? Of course there's new stuff. What do you want me to say? And I'm like, wait a second, David, I'm just getting it now. I'm just understanding
Okay.
now that
Okay.
there's
So
like
yeah.
this.
So to that point, I mean, Kosti and I were really excited to start Ultimate Sensei, and you were like, "Really? Why? What is this thing that
Right?
maybe that
No,
cool?"
fair point. I
Um.
didn't get Ultimate Sensei at first.
Okay.
I'm
So
not
now
even
we've
sure I
done
get
two
it
weeks
now.
of it. Does it seem like sort of cool to you or not? I mean, you can say if not.
Um,
That's perfectly fine.
I, you know, I feel like I was definitely the amount of interest that we had going on was more than I thought we were gonna get. And yeah, it's an interesting thing that I honestly, I still, you guys have a vision, and I'm just like, you guys are dragging me as dead weight. 'Cause I feel like, yeah, I didn't totally get it at first, and I'm still like a lot of these things, the new technological things. I'm this old guy, and I want to read books, and I want to sit at my board, and I love talking about chess. But right, a lot of the new things, it takes me a while. Plus, I'm like technologically challenged. It just takes
Sure.
me a while to learn new things,
Yeah.
to learn how to do them. Yeah.
But on that note, like sometimes my stream, Jesse, I just sit there reading a chess book and writing notes on a piece of paper, on like an actual piece of paper about what I'm reading. And people just watch my face as I do it or whatever, you
Yeah, yeah,
know?
yeah.
And Josh does that too. I think Josh read like a whole book of like Anand's games
Uh
on
huh.
stream over like whatever, like bedtime stories with Anand for like 2 months.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to the next one. I think we can continue talking about that. I really want to say with this, I'm happy to. I want to brainstorm more. This was mostly a brainstorming opportunity for me because I really feel like when I start thinking about the stuff I'm doing tomorrow and people playing each other online, like I didn't have that as a kid, and that would be just, man, to me it's mind blowing, and that I can set. Like a coach can sit there and be like, okay, you guys are going to play this position with this time control, and you're playing against that guy. Amazing to me. Really amazing.
Hmm.
Okay, so
Yeah.
now the next one, I gotta at first say, David didn't like it. David didn't like this topic, and I'll just
Yeah.
maybe
I
I'll.
saw
How about,
Jesse's 6 topics for today. I'd sent him 6 other topics
yeah,
yesterday, but he never got them.
yeah.
So then an hour before the show, I saw Jesse's 6 topics and I said, I don't know what your first 5 topics are because they're not questions. And
Uh,
the sixth topic is the only one I understand and I don't like it.
I take some responsibility. So I'll tell you what, I'll just introduce it, and David can shoot it down. And if we decide it's so hateful of a question, we don't even have to discuss him.
Yeah.
So I want to say, let me put it in my own words. Um, so for years, I've been fascinated by the idea that, first of all, that the doctor people don't, I feel, have a real grip on what autism is. And that there are certain behaviors that I would describe as autistic or mildly autistic that I feel like I have in myself and a lot of my chess friends. Of the people we know, David, I think there's only one person that is one GM who is clinically diagnosed as autistic, and that only happened recently. Like, I think 10 years ago, we knew him as being conceivably autistic, but he wasn't diagnosed as autistic.
Okay.
And other people, I would say, I think we would agree that they have autistic tendencies but are not diagnosed as such. And let me just say, the reason I was thinking about this just came to my mind as an interesting topic was last night I watched the first episode with my wife of Love on the Spectrum, and I was like,
Hmm.
right, this is something amazing. And one of the things that show is that show pushed that I hadn't thought of is it pushed the idea that 10 years ago everybody thought of everybody, most people, thought of autism as mainly being a male phenomenon. And that show is pushing the idea that there are actually much more female persons with autism, but that presents differently. And that to me is kind of a revolutionary thought of like, oh, well, I didn't, I didn't really think about that.
Mhm.
Anyways,
Yeah, I mean, like many words and concepts in our society, it was originally designed by men,
okay.
and they had very like gendered thinking in a lot of their diagnoses, right? So it's not the
Mm-hmm.
only thing that is gendered. I mean, hysterical used to be a medical condition,
Right.
and
Right.
it had to do with the Latin. I think Latin. I don't know if it's Latin or Greek, but the word for uterus,
Right.
and it
Right.
was thought that you could cure it by removing the uterus. So there's a lot of concepts, both just simply at the verbal level and then even beyond it, that have been designed and come up with in a gendered way by men over the years, and that are wrong, and could be, I don't know, discarded or revised.
Well, let's do this. Now we got to let Vishnu in here because he's very upset. Let's just let me read what he wrote. The label, i.e., autism or spectrum, can only be applied by a qualified professional. We are well past that point on the dojo. So let me just ask David: is that why the question made you uncomfortable, or was that
Why
would
did
you
the
put it?
question make me uncomfortable? Well,
Yeah.
because I'm not really qualified to answer that question. I can't,
Mm.
like, to some extent, I can't tell you, who is or isn't where on what spectrum.
Uh huh.
I mean, I I have some, like, mildly really inexpert opinions that I'm afraid of like saying for fear of
Mm.
being wrong. I generally prefer to speak about things that I know something about, or at least to make
Mm.
strenuously clear that I have no idea what I'm saying.
Uh huh.
In which case, I guess I have no idea why anyone would be listening to me.
Right.
Um, but my like vague thought is that like most human characteristics and qualities are on spectrums, instead of having like clear bright line divisions, and you're
Yeah.
either autistic or not autistic, you're either male or not male, you're
Mm.
either you know Caucasian or black or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think all of these things are kind of like constructs designed to make it easier for people to throw people into different boxes and barrels and categorize them. And so to some extent, like, my first blush answer to your question would be like, yes, like all other humans, chess players are on the spectrum
Mm.
somewhere.
Well, good. I think that my intuition is a little bit in line with you, and I guess where it's the reason it's interesting to me is I put it this way: it's like I think there's two ways of thinking about the autism thing. One is you kind of go with Vishnu, and you're like, okay, it's this box, and the professionals get to decide who's in the box. Or you say, look, it's this huge thing where you can go, you can imagine a completely different end of the spectrum. And I think I know what the opposite end of the spectrum is, and I am definitely not even close to it. The opposite is this: the far end of the spectrum is a complete extrovert who's comfortable with noise and various social cues going off at the same time. They enjoy interacting with those cues, and they're very good at giving the cues themselves, right?
Mhm.
Whereas if you imagine that as the end of the pole, and then you start moving down the line, well, then you realize, well, okay, we can kind of see that everyone is somewhere on that spectrum, right?
Mhm.
And for
Right.
example, I feel that I am much more. I have a much bigger problem with like noise. Really bothers me. And one of the things I just wanted to get at that I think is so interesting is is there something about chess players, and both in terms of developing their ability and just their desire to play chess, which just doesn't mean you're like diagnosed or you're on wherever the doctors say you are, but are you just more over there than the average median person. And my intuition is yes. I'm not making some strong claim about it, though, but it's, yeah, the reason I put it out there is it's just interesting as a source of speculation, just as well, who are we? And someone might want to say, well, leave that to the professionals. Well, okay, that's a fine answer, but am I not allowed to ask who I am and like what's going on around me, and to think about how the neurology of my mind interacts with these labels and yada yada, and how my neurology, frankly, like constructs my reality. As a philosopher, it's like, okay, this is just interesting. I don't,
Yeah, I mean, certainly you have a right to wonder about, who you are and what you are, and how you compare to other people if you want to, right? And what characteristics you have in common or separate from other people. That's fine. I mean, I guess one thing that you'll see in Love on the Spectrum is that a lot of the people in that show have like, have like a very, very strong passion for one or more things.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. Which some people would sort of like describe as being kind of like obsessive about the thing that they really like. Right. Mm-hmm. So there may be some that, and I don't know how much it applies to any other people on the spectrum, but like, the 10 main characters in that show all have something that they're pretty passionate about. And a lot of chess players are pretty passionate about chess.
Right.
So that may be why you're wondering about that. I'm certainly very passionate about chess, but and like you, I suffer when there's a lot of noise.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know.
I think also, I am bad with empathy. Very bad. I don't feel a lot of empathy, dude. And I do not relate to
You're like,
others.
Why shouldn't I ask this question in front of everybody?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I don't like the question of others' feelings and being sensitive to a very poor. That's just historically, I know that about this part of my own self-knowledge. And so whether I label it as autistic or not, it's just interesting to think that there's a spectrum that even if you don't relate it to the autism side, or what you might want to call the autism side, there's these other people out there who are very gifted at reading other person's social cues and giving them cues in response to make them feel good, to assure them. And that's an art form, right? And I don't have it. And it's just I feel like I'm allowed to ask the question. I don't know, it's interesting. Yeah. Okay, so everybody, thank you for tolerating my speculations. I hope Vishnu forgives me in whatever way he needs to forgive me. Yeah. We're going to go off air for just a short bit. Then we're going to come back with Sunday night at the fights. Loads of games coming up. Should be pretty fun. Any last words, David?
One person was grateful that you asked the question. Other people at least had a lot to say about it.
Yeah.
So I guess it was fine. I don't think that I had anything to contribute. So
okay.
I guess I'd be happy to know that we finished the topic without me upsetting a lot of people. That would be my dream scenario here.
Right.
And I hope that we were more convincing on some aspects that were more our areas of expertise, such as what should the role of Fide be, dismantling itself, what do we think of the Armageddon format, pointless to slightly stupid, etc.
Right. Okay, guys, we'll see you in just a touch.